videos soon with some cool gardening stuff. But I figured this was a topic that a lot of people seem to like. It got a lot of shares on my site, and it's a topic that can be very confusing, and it's plant nutrients. It is nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, but it's also all those other nutrients that we know plants need, but we don't know what they do, why they do it, what happens if you don't have enough. And so we're going to talk about that today. And so here we go. Here's a test. If you want to do this test, go ahead and do it. You don't have to. I hated tests when I was in school, so I don't blame you if you don't want to do it. But make a list of all the nutrients you think a plant needs to grow properly, thrive, and survive. So write it down, and then here's the real list to check yourself against. Boom. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, sulfur, chlorine, copper, magnesium. Oops, I have that twice. Iron, boron, molybdenum, zinc, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. There's a lot of stuff. Those are all elements, right? More than you would probably have listed unless you are a botanist, right? So here's what we need to understand. Fertilizer is much deeper than NPK. Those are the numbers we see on a fertilizer container. It is much deeper and more complex than that. And we don't need to know every intricacy to get a good understanding of how to grow plants, but we do need to get a base level so we can say, hey, what's going on with my plant? Maybe it needs more of this. Maybe it's not has enough of this. Let's keep talking. So we are all aware that plants need a good fertilizer, and whether that's coming from organic matter in your soil as you build it over time, whether you're buying organic nutrients, whether you're doing synthetic nutrients, plants need it. That's just a fact of life, right? So let's talk about the NPK numbers. A 10-10-10. That's 10% nitrogen, 10% phosphorus, and 10% potassium, right? And so 100 pounds of 10-10-10 is exactly the same as 200 pounds of 5-5-5 because it's a percentile, right? And so you're going to get 10 of each of these, and you're going to get 5% of 200, which is also 10 of each of these, right? So there's no real difference there. That's one thing that I think can trick people. And so let's talk about the primary nutrients first. Nitrogen, the granddaddy, right? This is a symptom. This is a nitrogen deficiency symptom in plants. Just so you can see, you get a lightness, a light greenness to the plant. And so this is one of the most important nutrients for strong, vigorous growth. Dark green leaves, a lot of the processes within photosynthesis. So plants that we're going to grow for mostly their leaves, their vegetation, grass, wheat, oats, leafy greens, microgreens, etc., they need a lot of nitrogen. And so when you're buying a nitrogen-based fertilizer for plants, you're going to want a high first number, a high N, right? 30-0-0 is what people will use for grass because, again, grass is pretty much all vegetation, right? It's all leaves. Just remember that rule. 100 pounds of 30-0-0 is the same as 200 of 15-0-0. And so, work on that, work on those math skills there if you want to make sure that you have a good grasp on what you're actually buying when you buy these fertilizers. All right, let's talk about phosphorus now. So here is an example of phosphorus deficiency in a tomato leaf. You can see it has that sort of purplish, reddish coloration there. Phosphorus is really used for root growth and development. So flowers that are fed with phosphorus will have more blooms, fruits ripen better and faster. It's very important to flower bulbs as well as to perennials and trees and shrubs. So effectively all plants, but it's important to know specifically what a plant will use it for so we can see what's going wrong, right? All right, potassium. Here is an example of a normal leaf, and then you've got potassium deficient leaves. So you can see this yellowing start to creep in from the outside of the leaf towards the interior. And that's a very clear symptom of potassium deficiency. So potassium is a general nutrient for all plants, being one of the big three, improving overall health, strength of the plant. It's a temperature regulator. It helps the plant withstand temperature extremes, and it also helps resist diseases. So a lot of the times, most soils are going to have a good amount of potassium in them, and so the third number is sometimes a little bit smaller than the first two. But it's important, if you looked at my video on soil tests, to test your soil. You need to know what's in your base level soil so you know what your plants are going to be short in or maybe have a surplus of. Because for all deficiencies, there are also toxicities. You can have too much of a nutrient as well. Very similar to us as human beings. You can have too little of a vitamin, you can have too much of a vitamin, right? Okay, now we're getting into the secondary nutrients. These are the ones that most people don't have a good understanding of and don't really understand how they impact the plant. And so here we're talking about calcium. Here's an example of calcium deficiency on some new leaves, so it's something that you can spot. It's important for plants in their younger stage of life, young roots, young shoots, helps build cell walls. If you have a calcium deficiency, what you're going to see is the growing tips, those edges, are going to start to decay and collapse, right? Calcium, it's an immobile element. This is what's interesting. So when there's a deficiency in calcium, the plant cannot move calcium throughout its structures to get to these younger leaves that don't have it. And so calcium stays where it is in the plant, which means that a deficiency is going to show up on new growth, not old growth, right? That is a key for calcium deficiency. Okay, now we're going to talk about magnesium. Magnesium, you can see here the deficiency symptoms. There is this sort of veininess that appears in the plant. It's a little bit lighter in color. And as far as function, magnesium is going to help uptake other plant foods and aids in seed formation, actually. It's actually something that's contained within chlorophyll, helps plants get that dark green color in their vegetation. It is essential for a lot of the processes within a plant, creating sugars, proteins, oils, fats, regulates the uptake of phosphorus. And so magnesium regulates the uptake of phosphorus, which is one of those big three nutrients, right? So deficiency symptoms, because this is what we're here for. How do we know what particular thing our plant is missing? Well, you know that by building a knowledge of what a plant looks like when it's missing a certain nutrient. So when plants are missing magnesium, you have this mottled yellow. So look at this. You have this mottled yellow between the leaves, between the veins of the leaves. Yellow areas eventually will turn brown and die. They may actually even turn reddish purple because with low magnesium, you're going to have poor uptake of phosphorus, right? And then you're going to get that phosphorus deficiency that we see right here, right? And so you can see there's a chain cause effect going on here. All right. There's some more stuff here about different deficiencies based on the type of plant, but we'll get into that. And if you want to look at it, of course, you can just go to epicgardening.com, check that out. All right, we're going to get into sulfur now. So here you can see a corn, sulfur deficiency in corn, right? And okay, what does sulfur do? Again, dark green color, it's needed to make chlorophyll, is as necessary as phosphorus and considered an essential mineral. Here's the thing though, like most soils have enough sulfur within them, and plants don't need a whole lot of sulfur. 10 to 30 pounds per acre, which is a very small amount. It's a soil conditioner. Honestly, very few people are going to run into a sulfur deficiency, especially if you're just growing at home. Most of the soil is going to have it. All right, let's move on to the trace elements. So we had our primary, NPK. We had our secondary, which we covered just now. And now here are trace elements. So these are elements that plants need in very small effects, small amounts, right? However, that does not mean that the absence of them is not a big deal. The absence of a trace element can actually be quite drastic for your plants as well, right? Okay, so if you are depending on your crops to do well, or you're just a gardener that wants your crops to do well, yeah, if you're missing a trace element, you're going to have a hard time, right? You're going to have a bad time. Okay, let's talk about it. Boron. So here is an example of a controlled boron deficiency. This is an experiment, right? And so here's a perfect plant, and then here's 13 days with boron deficiency, 19 and 21. So what you can see is this yellowing of the leaves in between the veins. You can see some spotting going on. It's actually quite a unique deficiency, so it's somewhat easy to identify. And what boron does is it helps synthesize protein. It helps develop cell walls. What you'll notice is a lot of these nutrients do a lot of things, as in they're used in conjunction with each other to perform most of the processes for the plant. So that's boron. Let's talk about chlorine, right? Chlorine is involved in photosynthesis. Here's a chlorine deficiency. It looks very similar to, let's say, a nitrogen deficiency. You're looking at a lightening and then some of this chlorosis in the plant. Okay, chloride, necessary for gas exchange. There's a whole lot I could go into about chlorine. Just know that it's necessary, and know, for the most part,